Welcome back to my channel. My name's Marissa and I like to talk about books and book design. At the beginning of March, I decided to try a TBR jar for the first time ever. I was always hesitant to do so because I identify as a mood reader. And maybe if you clicked on this video, then you do too. So let's talk about it. Do TBR jars help you read more, or do they send you into a reading slump? Let's start off by talking about the pros. One of the big perks of the TBR jar is that it forces you to read the books that are actually on your physical TBR. And I know, that sounds like a crazy concept, but that truly is one of the biggest benefits. It's so easy to forget about what you already have when we see these new shiny releases coming out every month, but I found the randomization of picking a prompt out of this jar and choosing on a whim helped me get really excited about the books that I already had. Books I have been collecting dust on my shelf for literal years. Literal. The TBR jar has this beautiful way of making you feel like you're doing something productive. That's one of the reasons I think it can work for you if you want it to. Another pro of the TBR jar is that it adds some fun to your reading routine. I'm someone who craves a healthy amount of spontaneity. The reading jar is just enough of that for me. Personally, I don't think I could do a TBR jar every month, but it is fun to shake things up every once in a while. There's also just a little bit of suspense or even risk to it. Like, will I get that fantasy novel I've had my eye on, or will I pick a 600-page historical fiction? But that brings us to the downside of the TBR jar. You might pick a 600-page historical fiction when you are not in the mood to read that. So let's talk about the cons of the TBR jar. Like anything with a 50-50 chance of making you feel like you're in control of your life or feel like you're completely out of control of your life, the TBR jar just might not be the method for you. I mean, what happens when the TBR jar prompts you to pick something that you're just not in the mood to read? Because let me tell you, if you're in the mood to read a light rom-com, you're gonna have a lot of trouble getting through a dense fantasy epic. And in my experience, when you're forcing yourself to pick up a book that you're not in the mood to read, that's a pretty good way to end up in a reading slump. I mean, like, do you really want to read War and Peace right now? Or do you want to pick up that cozy fantasy? Like, here's the thing. If you're not careful, the TBR jar can create a lot of unnecessary pressure. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that little voice in the back of your head that makes you feel bad for not sticking to the things you committed to doing. And that is exactly how I feel about the yearly reading goal, which is why I set it to a very low and attainable number, because I'm like a dog and I need positive reinforcement at all times. So if you're a mood reader, there's just a really good chance you're gonna pick up a book that you're not in the mood to read. And that's okay. If you're gonna make the TBR jar work for you, you have to be willing to let things go. I'm gonna go ahead and say that I don't think this is the best method for a perfectionist or completionist. Two things which I am. So I will say, I found that this really helped me push myself outside of my comfort zone, so do with that what you will. I mean, I think it's sort of a given that it's gonna work for some people and not for others. However, if you are really stubborn like me and want to try the TBR jar because it looks really fun when other people do it, then I have some tips for you. As I mentioned earlier, you gotta be willing to let things go. Look at the TBR jar as a guide to help you pick what to read next and not an end-all be-all list. In fact, I think it would have worked better for me had I just picked a new prompt throughout the month as I was finishing books, because when I saw the stack of books I had pulled looming over me, it made me really anxious as the month went on to get it done on time, when in reality, nothing's gonna happen to you if you don't finish your TBR. You just get to decide whether you want to continue it on the next month or pick something new. That's it. it's not that serious. And actually, I wonder if those of you who are watching who are not also booktube creators feel that pressure to complete things at a monthly cadence. I've been doing this for over a year now, so I'm starting to forget normal reader habits, because there are certain things that booktubers do in order to generate more interesting content. The plus side of that is that it helps you read more, and the downside is that it sort of creates an unnecessary pressure on something that's supposed to be a hobby. But that's a conversation for a different video. So yeah, my tip is just not to put too much importance on the monthly aspect of it. Just use the prompts to help you pick what to read next if you're feeling indecisive. And if a new release does come along that you just have to drop everything to pick up immediately, just do it. Just do it. Because that is exactly what I did last month when Sunrise on the Reaping came out. I knew I would be dragging through the other books on my TBR, and I don't ever want to feel like the things I'm reading are a chore that I'm slogging through. So if reading that new release that is on the top of your mind is gonna help you enjoy the other books more down the line, do it. Just do it. I figured if you're still watching at this point in the video, then you might want to hear about my March wrap-up. So, how many books from my TBR did I actually read? 4? 4 out of 6. But one of them I technically finished in April, so 3 out of 6. And then I read 2 other books that were not on my TBR. So 6 in total. 6 is maybe just a little bit less than I would typically read in a month. However, 3 of the books I read in March were off my physical TBR, and those were books that I was probably not gonna pick up anytime soon. So that was good for me. And I'm usually a really big audiobook gal, so I'm glad that actually 5 of these 6 books I read were physical books. I'll take my wins where I can get them, okay? So here's what I read. The first one I read was from the prompt, a book by a non-American author, which I read Emma by Jane Austen. I was actually already about 30% into this book before the month, so that definitely helped a little bit. I finished it out by reading the physical book as well as the audiobook at the same time. I'm so glad I did that. It was just fabulous. This is a perfect spring read. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I loved it. Speaking of a perfect spring read, the next book I read was Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This one was for the prompt, a middle grade book. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this story, but I still think it's worth reading the book if you haven't yet. It felt so much like reading a bedtime story, which was just so whimsical and nostalgic. I loved it. I really did. I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. However, there are a lot of problematic things in this book due to the time period when it was written, so proceed with caution. And then the next book I read was not one from my TBR jar. That was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Now, I knew I was gonna read this one in March because this was my in-person book club's March pick. In hindsight, I probably should have made it fit in the prompts I pulled, but what can you do? I moderately enjoyed this one. I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think it's such an important book, and it creates such thought-provoking discussions, and I think it's such a necessary story, but I just thought it was lacking in some of the context. My book club and I, we dissected it, so yeah, I was not the only one who felt that way, which was a little bit reassuring, but I think it's worth a read, but it's not like a new favorite by any means. Then, of course, there was not a single scenario where I wasn't gonna read this the moment it hit the shelves. I actually did go to a midnight release party for Sunrise on the Reaping, and I filmed a vlog of that as well as live reactions of me reading it. So if you haven't watched that yet, you should go check it out. Needless to say, I love this one. This was a 4 out of 5 stars for me, and if you want to hear more about it, watch the video. Okay, back to my TBR prompts. I had one that was a book from a random word generator. So the word I generated was fan, which led me to pick up I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This was unfortunately my least favorite from the month, and maybe why I didn't get through the last 2 books on my TBR. I really dragged through this one. I guess you could say I was not a fan. Listen, I love books with unlikable characters, especially when it's about obsession in some or any form. I found this one unbearable. I just didn't feel like I got anything out of it to justify me spending so many pages with such an annoying character. I think there are other books that are very similar to this one that are just executed better. So this was a 2 out of 5 stars for me. And then this last one, I did technically finish the first week of April, but whatever. It was from my TBR prompts, and that's what really matters. The prompt was based on a true story, so I read All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Maria Remarque. I loved this one. I loved it so much. This was actually a 5 out of 5 stars for me. It was so profoundly heartbreaking. I was really surprised at how accessible the text was, but the prose was still just so moving, and it's gonna linger with me for a while. If you're looking to get into historical fiction, or you just want to read about the horrors of war, this one. This is the one. And here's what I didn't read from my TBR jar. The prompt was a book less than 200 pages, and I picked Candide by Voltaire. And the reason I didn't read it was because I wanted to just dedicate one day to sitting down and reading it. I think I can do that, but I truly just did not have a single day where I could do that. I was so busy throughout the month of March, but I still think I'm gonna pick this one up soon once I can actually catch my breath. Working full-time is no joke. And then the last book that I didn't read was, interestingly, the one I was most excited to read. The prompt was a book you bought based off the cover. And that was, of course, Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. I was saving this till the end of the month because I didn't want to feel the pressure of the rest of my TBR looming over me. Like, I didn't want to rush through this one to catch up with the others. I wanted to take my time with it, which is probably why the TBR jar just in general doesn't work for someone like me. I like to pick my next book as I go. I don't like seeing a big stack. It stresses me out. So yeah, I still think I'm gonna read this one soon because now I'm excited about it, which is something to be said about the TBR jar. Even if you don't read it, it brings books from your physical TBR to the front of your mind. It's a win, it's still a win. So there's my March wrap up and my overall thoughts on the TBR jar. I do believe it can work for you and it can help you read more if you want it to. You just need to approach it with a little bit of leniency so that you don't fall into a reading slump. I don't think I will be doing it again anytime soon, at least not for the span of a full month, but I'm gonna keep my little jar around with prompts for whenever I don't know what to pick up next. So let me know what you think about TBR jars in the comments below. Have you ever tried it before? And if so, did it work for you? And with that, I am signing off, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.